I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of Donna Taylor and perhaps one of her friends. And now, who is Donna Taylor? Well, Donna, certainly her son was badly wounded at the Columbine shootout, in my understanding, and she did get well, but of course, they certainly looked into the background of what had happened, and apparently, at least one and perhaps both of the young men were certainly on psychotropic drugs. And Donna, as well, she and her son launched a lawsuit against the major drug manufacturers. And after that, well, basically, you don't understand how America really works. I mean, who is it that gives the hundreds of millions of dollars to people like Barack Obama to run for office? By the big drug companies and the big corporations, and they have connections all throughout our government. And of course, after Donna and her son launched a lawsuit against one of the major pharmaceutical companies, Donna, you tell the story. Donna, are you there?
Here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
My son survived the Columbine shooting and terrible injuries that he endured at that time were 7 bullet holes, and we thought, well, we're thankful he's alive, you know. But we took up and sued the drug company and went ahead and exposed the drugs, how we seen that the drugs were the cause of Columbine, you know, Eric and Dylan being on them. And then they went and just made up all kinds of lies about my son, and now he's being medicated under the state of Colorado. He's got a medical hold on him.
No, basically what you're suggesting is he is a political prisoner because he had the audacity to launch a lawsuit. Now, certainly were both boys on psychotropic drugs, or just one of them? Mm-hmm. And was it basically, was it Prozac or was it Lou?
To the public, of course.
Okay, but
that both were, but we have documentation from my attorney just recently, gag order papers that say that both of them were.
All right. Now, were they on Prozac? Were they on Luvox? What were they on?
That's what they were on, Luvox and Prozac.
All right. Well, they're made by different companies then. Were you
they really are, but it's the same shrinks that give it out to people, you know.
Okay.
And it's all the same. I mean, it's.
Well, now, why did the authorities did they say your son was psychologically unbalanced? What was the justification?
They tried to say he was schizo. It was a lie. It was a made-up lie.
Well, basically, have you had him seen by doctors?
Oh, yeah. He was fine after he was shot. 1999, 2000, 2001, he was fine. Numerous times to go into the doctor with colds or, you know, his pain in his chest from the bullets. There was never brought that up that he was schizo. It wasn't until a day that he was by himself that they just picked him up off the street, or somebody accused him of something at a bookstore, which was all made up, and he never even went to court. They just take him right on over to the mental place.
Well, how can they do that without a judge?
I don't know. I understand they can do that.
Well, no, but you must have had lawyers to look into this case for you.
No, I didn't have lawyers. I didn't have money to pay for lawyers.
Well, wasn't there any of the legal organizations that would help you?
No. The day that he was shot, we got all the help in the world. The day that they decide to do something to him, it's impossible to find anybody to help.
Well, now, you've had John DeCamp, who was a former senator from, I guess it's Kansas and Nebraska.
He just came back on the case 2 months ago to help. But
I think he went off the case because you got somebody else that's going to come in. Wasn't that the reason he dropped off?
That is exactly right. It wasn't my... I was working with Dr. Ann Tracy, and she was really getting upset with him for not getting anything done. You know, he was getting close to trying to get discovery and stuff done. And the drug company's trying to force us off the case because we wouldn't hurry up. And that was the reason for, you know, that he couldn't. He was too sick. He was getting surgery after surgery. I mean, he did the best he could under the circumstances. He was probably pretty much on a lot of pain medicine himself. And so it was just too much for John to keep up with, trying to get the discovery and everything done. And they wouldn't allow anything. You know, it was like Fort Knox, like you said. He had never seen a case like this ever.
I mean,
Ever.
John DeCamp, who's a very prominent lawyer, certainly, and he had never seen a case like this before?
Never. Never. He said he'd never seen anything so difficult, so ridiculous, and he was gag ordered not to tell anything. And
well, now, basically, are you allowed to see your son?
Yes, I can go down and see him any time here. But he's on a medical hold, which means every week he goes in for a blood work to get his medicine.
Well,
And
basically, he's on medical hold. Where is he living?
he's living in a group home in Denver.
And who is paying for his
Medicare.
support?
Medicare's getting charged a lot for this. Well, I could be getting the money and taking care of my own son. Medicare's making a lot of money. They sent me a bill when he was in the Fort Logan hospital. It was $778 a day, the bill was.
Well, did you tell him that you did not authorize him to be in the hospital?
I told him I did not authorize him being in the hospital. I would not sign papers to have him be put on the medicines. And therefore, they just, Mark's court-appointed attorney went ahead and linked up with my ex-husband because he's for the drugs and went and pulled me off as being a guardian.
No, wait a minute. You have your ex-husband then. How is he involved?
Well, he's now the guardian because he got involved with the court-appointed attorney. When my son got sick in the hospital.
Who involved your husband? How did he get involved? He hadn't been involved with
how he got involved is my son was coming off a clozapine, and the doctor took him off too quick, and my son ended up in the hospital very sick. He couldn't speak, he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk.
No, why? Wait a minute. Why couldn't he speak or walk or talk? When was
because
this?
They took him off the clozapine drugs too fast.
In other words, basically, he was on psychotropic drugs. They took him off of the psychotropic drugs.
Too fast.
And it had a dramatic effect on him.
Horrible effect.
Have you been able to get an independent doctor? Donna,
I have not been able to
Donna, have you been able to get an independent doctor to evaluate the case and to certainly give a medical opinion on this?
No, I've had a hard time finding one. No.
Have you? Is it because you can't pay for it? What is it?
Well, that's part of it, but it's not like I couldn't pay something. I'll give you an example: $70 or $80, sure. $100, $5,000, no. So that's where we're at.
So what is happening at the present time? Then your husband's his son is in a group home.
Yes.
Is he being medicated?
Yes, he is.
Is there anything psychologically wrong with him as far as you're concerned? Has he been seen, though, by any independent doctor? He's never been seen by an independent doctor?
No.
You mean there's not one doctor in all of
I have called a phone book full and couldn't find one. They don't want to get involved once they're involved with MHCD mental health.
And does mental health have police power that they can actually take people? Has he ever had a court hearing?
The only court hearing that he had that I know of was in Arizona, because I was trying to leave the state of Colorado. I was heading for California, and I stopped off at a Banner Gate hospital, and they put a hold on him. And then they had a court hearing in the mental institution there in Arizona. And they have a judge that resides in the mental institution. And he court-ordered him into the group home there, which they were also stopping the family from calling him or seeing him. And they almost made him a ward of the state there in Arizona. And he was there for over a year. And then I got him back home. And then this court system is not as bad as that one, but he's still not getting his wishes to be off the drug or be out of the system. Okay,
fine. Certainly, I guess, as Donna Taylor, if you have a question, our telephone number is 1-800-259-5791. 1-800-259-5791. Give us a call. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at the Genesis Communication Network. Our guest is Donna Taylor. And of course, it's a bizarre story, but we remember when her son was wounded there at Columbine, and then Mark did recover, and they felt that the psychotropic drug, and you have to understand that when you put on these drugs, they can actually create both suicidal and homicidal tendencies in certain people. And my understanding that there were other problems with these boys. Have you looked into this, that some of these boys had been sexually abused as one reason for their rage leading to the slaughter? What do you know about what really brought about what happened at Columbine? You've certainly lived with this. You've done everything you could to investigate it. What do you know? Why is the government there in Colorado actively suppressing information? A lot of the information has never been released. Why is that, Donna?
Basically, I have someone here that can explain even to greater detail. If you wouldn't mind having him on, it's Ron.
All right, fine.
Hang on. Let me get him. About the race.
Hello, Dr. Stan.
Hello, Ron. Can you tell us what's really happened? And certainly there's a lot having to do with Columbine that has been actively suppressed. And my understanding is that even to this day, many of the records are still suppressed in the name of, well, I'm not quite sure why, but they have never released all of the records, or they've destroyed some of them. What's the background?
In that case, John DeCamp is going to probably be able to share a lot of this with you. And can I say he has gone into these files, so he has extra information that we don't have. But he has affirmed that our findings are correct, and that what caused Columbine and what caused the shooter, the shot mark, to be on psychotropic drugs was because he was raped during an arrest. And we've actually got John on many programs as yours, he states to the point that it was about the rough handling that the two boys experienced during the arrest. So,
well, basically, then did the police cover this up? What happened there?
Yeah, this is the largest investigation in the history of the state. Even though we have a written motive written by Dylan to Eric, the two shooters, this was a yearbook entry, that they were going to get even for the arrest. That's their motive, written motive. And even though we have a picture that Harris drew the night of his arrest that appears to everyone to be a stick figure of a cop molesting a child, you can go to our website, ColumbineFamilyRequest.org, to see these pictures.
Now, basically, of course, this is the previous arrest, because didn't they both die or commit suicide?
Yeah, this arrest was 14 months before the tragedy.
What was the arrest for? Why were the boys arrested?
They had broken into a van. They were just up to mischief. These weren't the, goody two-shoes kind of kids. They were up to mischief.
All right, so they'd broken into a van, and they were arrested by the police, and what happened?
They were mistreated during the arrest.
Well, in what way were they mistreated? Were they hit? Were they slapped? Or what?
Well,
was there sexual molestation? What do we know?
We know that the classmates of Eric were teasing Eric about being molested. We actually have a reenactment that the boys put their friends up to. The friends of theirs played the part of cops. So we actually know where it happened. It happened on the trunk of Eric's car. And all of our information is backed up by a forensic psychologist that has researched this. And we're simply needing to get the truth out so that we can go on with our lives. At this point, I think we've run into... we've tried about every avenue we can to try to get help for Mark, and there's no help to be had, and he continues to deteriorate. Donna's not sharing with you his horrible condition at this point, but he continues to deteriorate. He's got tremor, he's got chest pains, he's vomiting, he's a mess, and he looks like a boy that has been mistreated in an institution. So in this case, I'm grabbing at straws, but we're trying to get out of this country. We're trying to get help in Ecuador. We learned that Julian Assange was a whistleblower, and he's getting protected by Ecuador. So we figured, well, Mark's a whistleblower, obviously. You need to make that connection that he was out telling everyone, speaking in FDA hearings and such, that this was a most horrible type of substance to put in your body, and then they forced it into his body. So he's never changed his tune as to what he would rather have, and he's always stood hard against having this stuff in his body. So how come they've taken control of his body when they've made it he's made it quite clear that they're doing what he finds to be vile? You know what I'm saying? You can't think that that could happen in this country. And his freedom has been totally destroyed. Before they took him in and drugged him, he was quite the man around town. He had been in the Bowling for Columbine movie. He had the girls. He had the things that a young man would want at that age. And when they got a hold of him, they destroyed his life. He's just a sad sack. You know, it's horrible to see them do this to a person.
Well, do you think that this is related to the fact that he had the audacity to bring a lawsuit against the major drug companies? Do you think this is retaliation?
These drug companies threatened all the families of the victims. Yeah, they said.
Now let's get into that. The drug companies actually threatened the families. Yeah. Now there were a number of families then, and most of them backed off. Is that what happened?
That's what happened, and it left Mark. And then John DeCamp, obviously, with him being a small office, wasn't equipped to tackle these huge drug companies. We have 16,000 pages, over 16,000 pages of information that John DeCamp has given us, and much of this has been rifled through, so he had much more. But he had the authorities come to his office and actually go through all the files and grab what they figured was important. Well, we got a few of them that they didn't get, and in this case we got some of the depositions of the mother and father of the shooter. And it shows quite clearly that the boy's mental state, the reason he was put on these psychotropic drugs, was because he had been arrested. And in that, you can only surmise, I guess, that the picture that he drew of a rape while he was being arrested had everything to do with why he was having these emotional issues.
Well, now, basically, did the family sort of concur with him being placed onto psychotropic drugs, or did somebody place him on it without his consent or the consent of his family?
What, Eric Harris?
Yes.
We don't have that. It was just that they brought Eric to a mental facility, and then they prescribed the drugs to help him because he was having fits of rage. He was bouncing off the walls. He was having issues. And during this questioning, it has the attorneys for the pharmaceutical company asking the mother, for instance, what was your boy like? Did he have any issues with crying, for instance? And no, he was able to shrug it off when he was in the ball field and whatever and got hurt. But in this case, he's had fits of crying over this arrest. So he had almost gone back, I guess, to an infantile, where he couldn't control his emotions. And
okay, hold that. Our telephone number is 1-800-259-5791. 1-800-259-5791.
Advertising on GCN.
Well, Dr. Stan here at the Genesis Communication Network, and certainly our guest is Donna Taylor, and then we have a friend of hers who is telling us really what's going on from his point of view, and apparently what had happened when the family was told by the drug company, you go ahead and you push this, we're going to come after you, and you'll be sorry you ever lost the lawsuit. Of course, they naive, didn't understand how the world really works. They proceeded with a lawsuit, and of course, there's a series of events take place that now has certainly Mark on psychotropic drugs in a mental, or at least in a facility, and of course he can't get off of them, he can't leave, and there's all sorts of court orders here, and yet apparently, at least according to Donna, he's never had a court hearing there in Colorado. Well, our telephone number is 1-800-259-5791. 1-800-259-5791. I wonder if right now it sounds like we have an echo. I don't know what's going on. Whether that's a drug company interference or just happening by accident. Under any circumstances, if you have a question or comment, why, let us know. But basically, do you have a lawsuit where this information is laid out?
Is there a lawsuit with this information?
Is there a website where this information is laid out?
Oh, a website, yes. We have Columbine Family Request columbinefamilyrequest.org. You can just simply Google Columbine Family Request. You can also see our YouTube's live leaks. Not all of our information is up on there. We've got a tremendous amount of information that's never gotten on the web, so don't think that that's all we have. But in this case, going back to the drug companies and their influence, they even went so far as to take the $7.5 million that people had simply put into envelopes and mailed to the victims of Columbine, and they took that money and opened up a drugstore. They called it Columbine Connections, and their goal was for people to come in there that were seeking help, and they included every little housewife that had an issue, and they were provided drugs, and that was what their goal was to dumb everybody down so that they would be able to control the situation. And a second goal was to keep the families penniless, which they've been quite successful at. The same thing's taking place right now, where the families of the victims of the theater shooting have they're demanding that some accountability be taken on the $5 million that's been donated so far to them. We're seeing a repeat of the same thing. Curiously enough, one of the sheriffs that we went to for help after we realized the sheriff in Jefferson County was of no help, we went to Arapahoe County, and we met with a Sheriff Pat Sullivan, who we learned later, just this year, that Pat Sullivan was raping children. And he's admitted to that, and they never even prosecuted him for it.
Wait a minute. How could he admit that he was raping children, not be prosecuted? That's not pretty far out.
He said he was so strung out on the methamphetamines that he was taking that he doesn't really remember, but probably. That's how he answered the question. He was charged with trading methamphetamines to homosexual prostitutes. These are the kind of law enforcement we have here. I hope you understand. Yeah, this is not normal, I hope. But in this case, these are the people that we're dealing with. And it just so happens that this the same judge that's dealing with the theater shooting, this Judge Sylvester, didn't prosecute. I mean, no one prosecuted him for these crimes. And he got like 12 days with time served.
Well, now, wait a minute. 1 minute you're talking about the sheriff, now you're talking about the prosecutor, the judge.
That goes to the prosecutor actually was the district attorney, Carol Chambers, and she dropped the case thinking that there was a lack of trust in her department or whatever, so she turned it over to the Attorney General. So it's Attorney General Souther's office, really, was the one that didn't prosecute for these other crimes. They simply had put Sullivan in a sting, and they busted him in the sting, and he got like 3 charges, and they stuck with that, even though we had gone to the sheriff's department and notified the authorities that he had done wrong by the Columbine victims by not investigating. So it's got me to the point where I'm pretty much given up on the whole thing. I'm leaving the country, and I'm quite disgusted with the American public, actually, because I've been trying to get some help here and trying to protect the children from all of this, and nobody seems to care. They're too concerned with their pocketbooks, I guess.
Well, look what they're teaching our kids in school. They start in kindergarten, telling them homosexuality is perfectly all right. They start their sex education, the 1st or 2nd grade. Why are they doing that? Because they want to corrupt our children. You can't tell me the people back in Pennsylvania where this coach was, certainly violating children. Everybody knew about it. They were all in on this. You go to the Bohemian Grove, you find the most wealthy and powerful people in our country engaged in pedophilia and homosexuality and child rape. And if you doubt that, we have a 4-tape set of people who've been to the Bohemian Grove, who knows what goes on in there, and you can get that 4-tape set of the Bohemian Grove from my ministry by calling 1-800-544-8927, 1-800-544-8927. We even have a book on the Bohemian Grove.
On that topic, Dr. Stan, Columbine is a classic textbook example of institutional protectionism of this pedophilic issue, because what people don't know is that they had an opportunity to stop Columbine by serving a search warrant to Eric Harris. and they had all the information they needed that Eric was building bombs, that he was planning to use the bombs in a place he hadn't chosen, Ground Zero. And in this case, they didn't serve the search warrant. And the reason they didn't serve the search warrant is because they would have known that had Eric had his opportunity to go into a courtroom, that he would express his reasons for building bombs.
In other words, the fact that he had been violated after he was arrested, is that right?
Yes.
Well, so they couldn't have that information out, so they couldn't get him into a court.
They didn't want it out, so they protected that information by keeping him out of a courtroom. They also had 15 other contacts with sheriff deputies. It took us years to squeeze this out of them. Initially, Sheriff's Department were acting as if they didn't know who these boys were, and years later we found out that they'd had 15 contacts, plus the arrest, plus they were in the diversion program. And they had a secret meeting 3 days after Columbine when we were burying and planning on funerals. They were meeting secretly with, we know that some of the big shots, all the attorneys for the county, the district attorney, the sheriff's department, all these people were at this meeting, and their reason for being at the meeting is destroying all the evidence that connected them to these two boys. The only way we ever found out that they had these contacts wasn't through paperwork that was generated by the sheriff's department, but by a journal that Eric Harris's father had kept.
Have you been in contact with Eric Harris's parents? Are they willing to help at all in this?
We've made attempts. They've never talked to the media. They've totally shut down. As a matter of fact, these transcripts we have of the depositions are highly prized, I guess. Talk to John DeCamp, that he acts as if these transcripts were the most important thing that he had ever run across in his 40 years of lawyering, that he just simply was confounded why they were so serious about keeping this stuff secret.
Okay, we have a caller. Who's calling in?
Anthony.
Hi, Anthony from Tucson. Go right ahead. Do you have a question or comment?
What my concern is, with all of the evidence that we know that we have criminals running our government, why has not the American people filed lawsuits against the 3 known branches of the government and the 2 unknown, such as the United Assassinations Corporation and the Federal Reserve Bank System?
Why haven't you done it?
I want to, but I don't have the money to file it in the court.
Okay, fine. Well, I certainly think, I hope that you'll get together and try to get other people and form local committees all across America to do just exactly what you're suggesting. But you have to take on leadership or find somebody else who's doing it. We're out of time. I share your concern. We should be being active if we want to maintain our freedom. God bless. Thanks for calling. We'll be back in a moment. Well, Dr. Stan back here at the Genesis Communication Network, and certainly our guest, Donna Taylor, and her friend, were talking about the difficult situation they've been placed into. And, of course, you're not going to read about this because the media is controlled by the people who are affiliated in most instances with what I call the Brotherhood of Darkness. And, of course, the people there certainly are working hand in glove with the drug companies. The last thing they want is for the American people to understand the degree of depravity at such high levels in our government. But you have to understand this goes right into the White House. In fact, John DeCamp will be with us next month, writes a book about the Franklin cover-up, a pedophile network that began at Boys Town in Kansas and went right into the White House. But you're not supposed to know this thing. You're supposed to believe with all the goody two-shoes things, but we live in a fallen and depraved world, and I fear God is going to bring his judgment upon this nation because the good people are not involved. What can people in the listening audience do to help at this point?
You know, we've done just about everything we can that we think is proper, and in this case, I don't know whether to do something improper or not. But the latest we did is we contacted and we took Mark and Donna down to Mike Kaufman's office, who's his congressman. And obviously we shared with him all the information that we had previously shared with President Clinton, and still haven't gotten anywhere. He won't pursue helping Mark. He won't pursue the investigation that we had done at Columbine. He won't talk to the forensic psychologists that are working with us. He won't talk to DeCamp. And in this case, we went to a Republican. I don't believe in this left-right paradigm, but they're all as guilty as the rest. But in this case, we were hoping that he could use the information that we had learned about who was the architect of the cover-up. So he's, can I say that? Do people understand when I say the Joe Paterno of the Columbine case? Well, in this case, it happens to be our Interior Secretary Ken Salazar. He was the Attorney General during the Columbine case, and he actually had a hand in incarcerating Mark. We had learned that it was a guy, Gary Kleinman, who was the lead investigator, who was messing with Mark. So we'd like to expose Ken Salazar as being a man who got to power on the blood and death of the Columbine children. And I would have to say that has a little to do with the Obama administration, because that's a rather prestigious cabinet position to be the Interior Secretary. And in this case, we have belief that Obama himself knows this, because Salazar told him. And we also know that, obviously we know that President Clinton knows this, because we told him personally, face-to-face, at a meeting at the Evans Mark Hotel, surrounded by the families of the dead and injured. So I don't know what to tell you. We've been to the top, and at this point, there's no help at the White House. There's no help anywhere.
Mark had 17.
What happens to you is what happens to me. I get framed and assaulted by cops, okay? And then I get arrested twice. They came with 8 cops to arrest me for not showing up for a hearing. Sounds a little bit like the Ruby Ridge case, you know what I'm saying? So in this case, all we are is trying to defend the children against pedophile rape. And anytime we make this statement that we believe a rape happened, the law says that they have mandatory reporting requirements. They're supposed to take our information and not add an agenda to it, and simply investigate the rape. And so far, everybody's batting zero. Makes me think I need to go to a foreign country where they're not part of the gang, the syndicate that runs our country now. And in that case, we're appealing to the government of Ecuador, hoping that maybe we can get Mark free and get him down there where we can get him some medical help. And obviously, I could probably, go for political asylum myself after what they've done to me. And I don't need that, because I was able to fight them off legally and get all those false charges dropped. It cost me a great deal, including my home, in defending them.
Well, I appreciate everything you're doing, and to give Don our best. I appreciate your courage in taking a stand. What we need to do is get other people to get involved, not only with your problem, but there are a multitude of problems and stories like this that we can think of, although this certainly is one of the worst ones. God bless you. Thanks for what you're doing, and keep in touch with us, will you?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Stamp.
God bless. Okay, and of course that was Donna Taylor and her friend, and certainly they have an amazing story to tell. And it's a little difficult to understand the whole thing, but I've heard similar stories for many years. This is what really goes on behind the scenes. As you know, we have in the interviews with a couple of government assassins. These are people hired by the government to kill people. And certainly one of them is Chip Tatum, the other is Colonel Daniel Marvin. They're both dead today. You can hear my interviews with them on our 4-CD set on Deadly Assassins. We also, of course, tracked down the man who'd written the book or was affiliated with the book Target Patton, and he'd actually tracked down the man who was paid to kill General George Patton. We carry the book Target Patton. Understand this is not imaginary, it's real. We have a 4-CD set on the USS Liberty. We have interviews with people who are on the Liberty who were told by their commanding officers that they would be killed if they ever dared to tell anybody what happened that day in 1987. And for 20 years, these men lived in fear. Nobody on that ship told the truth. They wouldn't even tell their wives what happened. These were American servicemen who lived in terror that they would be killed by their own government if they ever told what happened there when the Israelis tried to shake the USS Liberty at the instigation, certainly, of President Johnson and Robert McNamara. You want to get the 4-CD set on the USS Liberty. We actually have a DVD on the Liberty. We have we have 2 DVDs on the Liberty, and you need to get them. They're available from Radio Liberty by calling 1-800-544-8927. 1-800-544-8927. Hey, you want to know how they killed Martin Luther King? We have a 4-CD set of my interviews. One of them is certainly with the lawyer who is hired by the King family to bring out the truth. And let me tell you, James Earl Ray did not kill Martin Luther King. They sent an innocent man to prison to cover up for the true assassins. We actually have the book written by the lawyer who actually was hired by the Martin Luther King's family. And then, of course, we have a 4-CD set on Bobby Kennedy. We have a DVD on Bobby Kennedy. Of course, it was made in England. They couldn't make one like that here in the United States. We have a book on Bobby Kennedy and how he was murdered. And believe me, it wasn't Saran who killed him at all. This is the real world. And, of course, it exists because the good people are not doing anything. And this is why you need to read my book, Brotherhood of Darkness, why I hope you'll support Radio Liberty. We risk our lives every day when we come onto the radio. And I will tell you that a number of the people I've interviewed have died under very, very mysterious circumstances. One of the other best sets we have, of course, is the interviews with Malachi Martin, who tells an amazing story of how when John Paul I died after about 33 days in the papacy, and they had a conclave at the cardinals, and you'll actually hear Malachi Martin telling this story, and they selected a cardinal to become the pope. And as he was moving from his seat to the podium to accept the papacy, somebody handed him a paper and said, if you accept the papacy, you and every member of your family will be killed. Needless to say, the cardinal did not accept the papacy, and John Paul II became the pope. Understand, ladies and gentlemen, there are secret societies out there. They kill people, and it's happening because the good people in America aren't involved. Our job is, of course, to get the truth out. We hope you'll join the Radio Liberty family of supporters. You'll help us get the information out. We are having an all-day seminar here on the 21st of October. We're bringing in some excellent speakers. We'll start at 8:15 in the morning. We'll go till 6 o'clock at night. It's an experience that many people enjoy, and they come year after year. We do have a discounted rate on hotel rooms, but you'll have to get one soon. Our telephone number is 1-800-544-8927. 1-800-544-8927. And then if you're in a position to help Radio Liberty financially, we'll certainly appreciate it. We want to be able to maintain what we have at the present time. We've had to give up 2 hours of shortwave, but that was costing us $5,000 a month. For the 3 hours, we have 1 hour we're still keeping, but we believe our message is important. And remember, because behind everything are powerful spiritual forces, there is a conspiracy against God, ladies and gentlemen, and is working at the highest levels of Washington, D.C. and in the White House today. Please pray for America, but pray for Radio Liberty, our provision and our protection. Well, this is Dr. Stan back here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay, and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story, hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at and that illusion is usually king. But in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality and not illusion or delusion that's going to determine what the future will bring. And I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of John DeCamp, who at one time was a state senator for many, many years, until, of course, he became involved in something called the Franklin cover-up, involving a pedophile network beginning in Boys Town and extending right into the White House itself. And when he exposed that, of course, the whole house of cards came down. John, thanks very much for being with us this afternoon.
Yes, sir.
Well, basically, are you back working with Donna Taylor on the effort to get her son out of detention?
Well, believe it or not, I am indeed, excuse me, I am indeed doing that. And if there's a God above, I think we'll kind of finish the story and get it done. Because if anybody's entitled to get some truth out, it's this kid that received 13 gunshots, mostly around his heart, which is a miracle upon miracle upon miracles that he's even alive. He was the first one, I think, shot at Columbine and magically survived, and I ended up representing him, and some incredible things came out of that case.
Why don't you tell us about the case from your point of view, rather than my asking questions? Why don't you just tell us what happened?
I'm going to summarize it in blunt, simple, straightforward terms. Mark got shot. I think he was the first one shot. As you know, a whole bunch of them were killed. I don't remember the exact number. And a whole bunch more wounded, and everybody thought he was going to die, but he just kept fighting on, and he survived. And as I was doing investigation to represent him, first of all, getting approval in the courts of Colorado there where it occurred, because I was an attorney from Nebraska, but I had been on all kinds of cases, the Oklahoma bombing and a bunch of other national cases you all know about. And this was just one that somebody got my name and called me, and I agreed to represent him, in this case, Mark Taylor. And one of the first things I discovered, talking to him and checking on things and starting to do depositions, in other words, questioning potential witnesses from the family of the shooters, you know, to the kids that were hurt, to others, and strange, bizarre things started showing up in my depositions and information I was gathering. And as a result of that, I insisted that we start looking into things even deeper, because there was some testimony I had under sworn oath, excuse me, that at least one or both of these boys had been picked up several times previously for supposedly improper sex acts or something, or this or that, trying to bang a car or steal something or whatever. But then they kind of were taken care of, so to speak, in a way, by certain law enforcement people who used the boys themselves for their sexual needs and purposes. And the boys got put on these, or the Mark did for sure, got put heavily on antidepressant drugs. And one thing that came out there, because we were learning a lot about the other boys too, the ones that did the shooting as opposed to the ones who were shot, they also learned to play with the stuff. And the way they learned to use it was, you would know, you took a double dose for, let's say, a week, and then you cut it off completely, and it created the power. You could do anything. You could...
Hold that thought. We'll be back in a moment.
Okay.
Well, this is Dr. Stan. Our guest this afternoon is John DeCamp, and of course I've known of John for probably 20 years or more, 30 years. And he was, of course, a state senator for a number of years in the state of Nebraska, one of the leaders of the political movement in Nebraska. And then, of course, he got involved in something called the Franklin cover-up. In other words, he did research and wrote a book about this pedophile ring that began in Boys Town and went right into the White House, involved some of the most powerful people in Washington, D.C., because believe there are homosexual and pedophile networks all throughout our nation's capital, but you're never going to hear about that sort of thing. Well, of course, when John did that, of course, the house of cards began to tumble in on him, and but his book certainly has sold well over. How many copies of your book are out there, The Franklin Cover-Up?
I have no idea now. We were well over 300,000 or 400,000. I never spent one penny ever advertising it. I paid for the printing and everything myself. Just got it done, and then word of mouth started selling it, and it caught on, and I think it was a New York Times bestseller for a while, and teams kept coming in and doing, 2020 had a team come in, and Discovery Channel had a team come in and do an investigation, checking into it, and they had that Discovery Channel thing, for example, on national TV, on all the channels, just long enough to appear for its 1 hour showing on the East Coast, and then it got pulled because a bunch of congressmen exerted tremendous power and some other prominent figures and got it pulled. I've still got copies. I got a pirated copy that got to me from maybe the people that produced it, who were bitter because they thought they were going to get some, like the Nobel Prize in whatever it is in that stuff. But anyway, it was just strange, the things that happened as that investigation into the Franklin thing went on, and I was one of the first ones who stood up when it started, because some of these stories from some of these children were coming out, and I was one of the first ones, and I'm still embarrassed about it, who stood up, and they had headlines all over the papers about it, because I stood up and I said, these stories are absolutely insane. And then I said something else even more stupid that got me in trouble. I said, if I really believed any of these things, I'd be the first one to step forward and investigate and do something about it. And that would be my obligation and duty as a former senator for 20 or so years, I said I'd be the first one to step up and try to do something about it. Hold that
thought. Well, John was just saying that when the information came out on this pedophile ring that extended from Kansas all the way into the White House, he said, well, if this is really true, it ought to be investigated. He ended up investigating it, writing a book, and certainly, last count, there were maybe 400,000 copies out. Of course, the Discovery Channel tried to do a program on it, but pressure was put on. It was only shown on the East Coast. They blocked it off so it couldn't be shown in the West House, but these pedophile rings existed 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and they still exist today. We carry the book, The Franklin Cover-Up. We carry a parallel book, The Franklin Scandal, which includes a great deal of John's work in it. You need to understand this is not imaginary. It's real. What you're seeing back at the University of Pennsylvania is simply the tip of the iceberg there. Certainly the pedophile network is at all levels there. Well, my wife has said we don't carry those books. We used to carry them. I guess maybe we're out of them, but certainly if anybody wants to know about them, you can let us know, and we'll tell you where to get them. But basically, of course, John has more recently gotten involved with this case involving Mark Taylor. And he was a young man who was shot at Columbine. And then, of course, everything was done to cover up the truth. And the truth of the matter was that the reason that Harrison and his buddy, of course, were so angry and wanted to commit these crimes is because they'd been repeatedly sexually molested by the police. And the police there were covering up everything. They couldn't let the public know that the police officers were engaged in sexual activity with the people. And so certainly Harris and the others were placed onto psychotropic drugs, and of course they were taking it in such a manner they got a tremendous surge from it. Of course, these drugs tend to bring out suddenly homicidal and suicidal tendencies, and that's exactly what it did with these two boys. Apparently, both were on these psychotropic drugs. But you pick up the story there, John.
Well, just let me kind of go in the whole circle, and I'll start at one place and another. But anyway, where did I stop last time? What did I last say?
Well, basically, of course, you were just saying that Mark Taylor.
Oh, yeah. Well, anyway, so when I made this statement, I'll go back to the beginning there. When I made this statement about if I really believed any of this, I'd be the first one to step forward and investigate it. And then I got a letter from a couple young kids that were in prison. They had been jailed just a couple weeks before when some of these stories started coming out. And the first act they did was jail the kids for telling anything. They go, this all has to be lies. And I got one letter from one kid, and just so you know, for the record, the kid, I won $1 million plus lawsuit for him, and that also located the lost missing boy, Johnny Gosh, who was the first young boy to have his picture on all the milk cartons, remember? He played into this whole crazy thing, believe it or not. We located him, and it just goes on and on. But anyway...
Well, Johnny Goss, of course, had been recruited into a pedophile and then homosexual networks. And did Johnny Goss ever go home?
I guess I've got to be a little cautious even today.
All right.
Johnny Gosh has seen his mother. His mother and he have had contact.
Okay.
Johnny Gosh was put into a world where once the young people were, so to speak, brainwashed and every other way compromised and involved in so much stuff that if they told it, they'd end up dead, they're convinced. So anyway, it's an insane world which I never would have believed existed if I hadn't been buried in it trying to investigate this thing.
Well, because there was a book out there, Why Johnny Can't Go Home.
Why Johnny Can't Come Home.
Sure.
In fact, the author, the man who helped Noreen write that book, has been here in Nebraska after he did a documentary on me years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. I don't know when. He's been here for a couple days now, and he just finished up, I think, yesterday, getting his new documentary ready, where he once again now is going to have me tell him the story and tell him everything, because this whole Franklin thing was crazy. As I say, I started it just determined to prove that it was nonsense, and because I received these letters from these kids in jail, and they said they had seen the headlines in the paper where I, a former senator, I was just gotten out of being a senator. I said, well, these have to be nonsense. If I really believed them, I'd be the first one to step forward and do something, but I just can't believe it. This one boy called. Somehow he got called or wrote me. I can't remember exactly which one's called. But anyway, and he said, I know you think we're all crazy, just like they said in court, those judges, but we're telling the absolute truth. At least I am, he said. I don't know what the others are even telling. He says, but I know I am. And I've got proof. When I was a little boy, about 5 years old, my grandfather taught me I should keep a daily diary every day. He taught me to write it and do it every day and keep a record. And I did that every day. He would check me, Grandpa would, and keep me doing it. And he says, I did it. And then the other day, when they grabbed me to put me in jail or told me I was going to jail, I took my diaries going way back to the very first ones, and I put them in the window well. And they should still be there at the house, even though the house is empty now because my mommy lost the house. She said, but if you go look there, you'd see I have those diaries, and they tell you all about the stuff with names and everything. So I thought, oh, God, I'll go check on it. So I drove over into Omaha, where I didn't know the neighborhood, but he had given me an address, and I got there, and it was in a vacant house just sitting there, and I went to the window well, you know, those kind of things on the about a foot or 2 feet into the ground there, for basement windows or something, and I scraped a little bit of dirt back, like the kid said it was under about an inch of dust and whatever, and sure enough, there were all these books. And I started reading when I couldn't believe some of the things I was reading, and I thought, well, boy, this is calling my bluff. I better find out if this is more craziness or something. And so I hired one of the best firms in the country. The only place I could find anybody, even though it was expensive as hell, was an outfit from New York that was doing all kinds of work for FBI's and police departments and people like that for establishing validity of writing or when something was done or so on. They checked the paper, when the paper came out first in existence, when this kind of ink was in existence, what the chemicals in the ink are. I can't even tell you all the crap they do because it blew my mind. But anyway, they concluded, yep, they're legitimate. These things were done just when they said. Tell them the writing is when the little boy's 5, 6, 7 years old, he's writing this, and he gets better and starts using writing instead of just printing and on and on. So I go to see the kid in jail again and talk to him. Oh, and one of the people that first got involved in it, because I called the Nebraska senators and told them they should investigate this, and they passed a resolution to do it. They started a team headed up by Senator Lawrence Schmidt that started investigating it, and it was just crazy as they started finding one thing and another and just awesome things about very prominent people, not only in Nebraska, but all over the country who were involved in this network of pedophiles or whatever you want to call them, who used to take children, particularly anywhere from maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years of age, particularly the younger kind of halfway grown ones, 10, 12, 13, 14. And they would get them involved and compromised and use them just like you use an animal or train a dog or something. Anyway, to do sex and be hauled around the United States in private airplanes, private jets and other things, taken to Washington. Some of them have been into the White House, just on and on. As I say, it all sounds unbelievable, but I've been sued in 4 different states now by some of the most prominent people in the country, including the former police chief of Omaha, because these people got injured. How did they get injured? They lost their jobs because of my book, as my book became a bestseller and so on and so forth. And so they sued me. So I won every single frigging one of them, knock on wood, and I hope to keep doing it if anybody wants to sue, because I had to go, like the last one, was just finished about 2 years ago, in Ogden, Utah, which is Mormon Central, if you ever heard of the Mormons. Anyway, that's where the Mormon college is, and this police chief had gone there after he lost his job as police chief of Omaha, about the longest anybody's been there as police chief, and very prominent. And he was an instructor, professor there, and he sued me out there, and I thought, oh boy, I'm doomed now. I'm in a Mormon college or town, the Mormon Central place. I'll get buried here. But we went ahead and brought in the witnesses from all over the United States, had a regular, honest-to-goodness trial. Took I don't know how many days, as I recall, but then the judge came to hand down the decision, and I thought, oh, God, because he started out by saying, I know the police chief here. I think he's a wonderful man. I thought, oh, boy, this is doomed. But then he said, next paragraph, and I still registers in my head, ringing bells and everything else. He says, but I have no choice under the circumstances, under my oath as a judge, and the Constitution of the United States, words to that effect. I have no choice but to rule in favor of the former senator from Nebraska. He proved his case.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is the sort of thing that really goes on, and Chris says this gets over into what happened in Columbine. I mean, these boys were repeatedly molested by the police. Beforehand, they were just getting even. doesn't justify everything.
I'm going to get
hold
back.
That thought.
I'm going to get back to Columbine because it follows up and just is like almost in bed with these other things.
Okay, you go right ahead. You go right ahead from there,
okay,
John.
So anyway, I get involved in that crazy Franklin King and have the trial where I filed the first of its kind in the United States of America lawsuit against the Roman Catholic Church and some priests. And that's the lawsuit, as I say, it was the first of its kind, but let me tell you the true story, which I've got proof of, which I guess another documentary is coming out soon, you'll probably see, of why I did it. I had been a little boy raised as a Catholic, and I ended up spending a couple of years even as a seminarian, studying to be a priest for a while. So there I was now in college and out of college now, and lawyer and businessman and whatever. And I remembered back to my religion days and so on and so forth about getting an audience with the Pope. So I called or wrote, or I don't remember who arranged it, my office personnel who worked for me in my main offices, they called and they got an appointment with the Pope, audience with the Pope. And I thought, wow, I get to meet the Pope and talk to him and tell him about this and see what he says. So I go to Rome, to the Vatican, and for the audience. And then I learned what an audience with the Pope is. It means a bunch of people gathered, and the Pope comes out and gives a blessing and maybe gives a little sermon or something, and that's about it. Then if you have an issue or something, you end up going to one of the ones assigned to actually talk to individuals with this issue or that issue. My issue was, I told them in advance, talking to them about priests who are molesting children. I wanted to talk. I was sent to a Cardinal, Ratzinger was his name, and he listened to my story, and I said, I know this sounds horrible, and I hate to do it, but I said, I'm planning to actually sue these people, these priests, for these terrible things. And this is this Cardinal Ratzinger there, and he said to me, listen carefully. He says, you've told me what you want to do. You want to sue the church. You want to sue the priest. He said, let me tell you, the North American Church, his exact words he kept using, I can remember that more clearly than the North American Church will not listen to Rome on this. Yes, Rome knows about it. We've tried to do things. The North American Church will not listen to us. They say they know how to handle it. And I says, so what are you saying? He says, do what you know is right, do what you must do. I said, well, I'm going back and sue them, but people just will get crazy when they realize I've sued the Catholic Church and claiming these things. And he says, do what you know is right. So I went back then right after I left that papal audience and came back to the United States, and I filed the lawsuit. And as I say, I ended up winning over $1 million in the lawsuit, but now you want the rest of the story. The judge, who was a good church boy himself, he said he was dismissing out the Catholic Church priest, even though he was holding the others responsible because the church wasn't entitled to be sued. So they got dismissed out, even though we had a complete trial, witnesses and everything, and proved the case.
Hold that thought. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and John was just talking. It was very revealing. He had actually raised Catholic. He had, of course, heard the stories. He had proof of a boy being molested. Not just one, but a number of boys being molested by priests. He actually went over. He wanted to have an audience with the Pope and tell him that he was going to sue the Catholic Church. And when he got there, he wasn't allowed actually to talk to the Pope, but he talked to a man named Cardinal Ratzinger. Now, Ratzinger is the current Pope.
I was going to make that the rest of the story to you.
But anyway, of course, when Ratzinger heard this story, and And John said, I intend to go back to sue the American church. And Cardinal Ratzinger said, we know what's going on in America. They will not listen to us. They will not take directions from Rome. They said they'll handle it themselves. And John said to Cardinal Ratzinger, what should I do? And Ratzinger said, do what's right. And so John came back and brought a suit against the Catholic Church and won $1 million. Now, was anything ever paid on that, or was that simply written off by the judge?
Well, the person who was convicted, who was the key leader of everything, a man named Larry King, not the Larry King you hear on TV, but this one was famous too. He was officially fastest rising black star in the Republican Party. He had been at two of the national conventions, Republican national conventions, where he sang the opening national anthem. And he was there where I saw him at the national conventions, because I was a delegate to both the Republican national conventions. That's been quite a few years ago now. Anyway, and he was the one singing and being so prominent, because he was such a prominent black man that was very, very famous. Anyway, and he was the one who was hauling these kids. He had a Franklin Credit Union. He had a bank, basically, and he was stealing multi-millions, and on and on and on. But so I'm watching this program years later, after I got the judgment and got him convicted, and he went to prison, even though the judge released the priest. Said you just can't be suing the Catholic Church like this. Anyway, and Larry, of course, went to prison, and now he's out after, I don't know how many, 10 or 15 years in prison, and he got off easy, considering everything. And I think he's over in somewhere near Washington, D.C., maybe very successful again, I heard some people say. So I hope my time hasn't expired. Maybe there's some way I can still try to collect $1 million. Plus, it'd be a couple million by now. But he's still alive, so far as I know. And of course, he was in prison at the time and didn't have any money. They seized all the money he might have because he had stolen 30 or 40 million. They found out. Anyway, so that's kind of the story there. And it was at the height of all this, after I think I had written the book and the first edition of my book and everything on the Franklin thing. It started, I got involved here in Nebraska, and it went all across the United States. One of the people that called me then was somebody from a place called Colorado, where they had a big shooting, Columbine shooting, and the mother of a young man named Mark Taylor called me there and said she'd heard about me, and some other people called me that had heard of my cases from the Oklahoma bombings, just a lot of others of the same ink and seriousness. And so I agreed to represent the boy. And as I say, it was in representing him when I started taking depositions of these people that it just became more and more crazy and serious, and I'd have probably not believed these things, except I'd been through the Franklin thing, and one thing after another had been proved over and over and over and verified there. And so here was the next round, was Columbine. And in Columbine, it was crazy because here I was looking at law enforcement and raising questions and looking at the effects of the drugs, particularly antidepressants that are poured down young people's throats at a young age and have a really pretty profound effect. But this was years ago, and one of the first things that you should know is that at that time there were no laws requiring these warnings on drugs about who can take them and who can't and who has to. There were no warnings at all. But of course, they knew at that time that they produced homicidal tendencies and suicidal, and they brought out violence. They knew that. I wanted to sue the major manufacturer of this drug, and that's when all hell broke loose, and I don't want to offend anybody, But all hell broke loose, and
hold that thought, John. We'll be
Okay.
back in just a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan. I guess is John DeCamp, and John is telling us, of course, what happened when he got involved with certainly representing Mark Taylor and his mother and their lawsuit against the drug companies. And, of course, you don't understand, ladies and gentlemen, the people, a few major companies of great wealth control our nation. I mean, where do you think Barack Obama was able to get $600 million to run for president here?
Believe me, I know this. I know it very well.
And you go right ahead and tell the story, John.
So anyway, I was convinced that I was on the right track, and so in the case that we were doing there in Colorado over Columbine, I went ahead and sued the drug company, the major manufacturer of this particular drug, and I won't go into real specific details right there, but anyway, and one thing led to another, and I had some illnesses, and I got fired from the case. Kind of, I think they fired me. I may have just left it, but anyway, and as moment I left the case, literally the moment I left the case, the court, the judge, ordered all the records sealed that I had taken. In fact, they sent 3 state patrolmen from Colorado all the way over to Nebraska, about 700 miles away to where my office was in Lincoln, my law office. And they had warrants and everything else so they could search my offices, all the records on Columbine, and seize them, these things. And then I found out here just recently, because Mark Taylor is still in trouble as a result of all this insanity. Anyway, I found out then, now I'm dealing closely with the Columbine people again. And I found out that, for example, Mark's been put on these, and he's been under the care of some supposed institutions there, and he needs to be free of that. He's more sane than you and me 99% of the time when they don't pour this crap down him. And I'm going to step in again and do whatever's necessary to try to help Mark, because he was just a victim. But then I found out here just the other day, I didn't even know this, they had ordered these records sealed for another 25 years.
And because they can't let the truth come out, ladies and gentlemen.
I did not ever believe this possible, but I've learned something in all this. The Franklin case and a couple others, and the system protects itself. And my best friend, the guy that became my best friend ever and kind of godfather and everything else, he told me this once upon a time when I was going over a case with him. His name, by the way, you might even remember, was Bill Colby. Bill Colby, who became the head of the CIA and everything, you know. In fact, he was fired by Nixon. Kissinger was officially the one that fired him. Do you remember?
He was the guy who went for the canoe ride in the middle of a storm.
That's right.
That's just in the middle of dinner. He just went for a canoe drive.
But he had been my best friend and guide for most of my life, for a stranger story than anything you could imagine. When I graduated from law school and got my doctorate and started the practice of law way back in what would that have been, 68, 67, 67, there was this thing going on called the Vietnam War, I think we called it, didn't we? And I got sent to a place called Vietnam. I got this letter from Uncle Sammy, and Uncle Sammy said, "We'd like you to join us." And I said, "I'd rather not. I kind of like life the way it is now. I've got a law practice." And Uncle Sammy said, "Well, you're going to have to report or you'll be in big trouble, boy." So I reported. And that's right at the height of when the Vietnam War is going pretty good. And I volunteered and became an officer because I thought it would keep me from going to Vietnam, because I knew they were just sending everybody that could do anything to Vietnam. And then the war seemed to get hotter, and so there was a guy named Richard Nixon running for president, and he said, if I'm elected, this war will be over. I thought, well, all I need to do is stall, but the only way to stall, if you were already in the Army, drafted, or in the Army, was if you were in special schools they had in preparation for special duties in Vietnam. So I volunteered for jungle school, then airborne ranger school, officer hire training, and the final one I volunteered for that you could get a delay for was Vietnamese language. And then they had something called the Tet Offensive, which you may remember. So what do you think they did with some young guy just out of college who had all these deferments all these years, like everybody did during that, who was in school during that Vietnam War, and they run through the jungle, they're an officer, they jump out of airplanes and they speak Vietnamese. Why, they send them to a place called Vietnam, and there I met a guy named William Colby, who was officially named as something called Deputy Ambassador. And he was, in fact, top man of the CIA then. And he had this special program called the Phoenix Program, which only has come out now in the last 10 years as to what it was. And I was put into that, and that's a strange life I was at over there, Vietnam. And the idea was, instead of bombing entire villages and getting the anger of the people and the bad publicity around the world, you would have teams, special trained teams, go in with soldiers, and they would secretly figure out who the key leaders were, and then you would take them on and wipe them out. So Bill became my best friend over there and guide, and when I did the most unusual thing anybody ever imagined over there, I am the first, last, and only one you get to meet or talk to in your life. I became a senator while I was over in Vietnam, and about the youngest senator at the time. And that was a long time ago now. That was what? God, that's been 30, 40.
About 40 years ago.
46.
Right.
Holy crap. Anyway, so the Army tried to stop me from running because they said, you can't do this. I said, well, I'm doing it here. How are you doing it? They said, I said, well, I just send some letters and let the letters get passed around, and I send letters because I can write free on the letters, because soldiers in combat, in war, are allowed to send their mail, their personal mail, free, and they tried to stop me, but when they went to get the legal ruling, they found they were wrong, that even though it had never been done before, it was legal, and all the publicity and everything back in the United States, and my letters getting hundreds of thousands of people. I ended up winning and reading about it in the Stars and Stripes. I can still remember going out on a helicopter, supposedly to slaughter some people, and one of the soldiers was reading the Stars and Stripes newspaper, and he's sitting there reading it, and he says, hey, look at this. Some crazy SOB over here in Vietnam has become a senator. I grabbed that paper from him, I looked at it, and sure enough, it was me. So I served right to the last day, came out back to the United States when I served my time and took office. In fact, I can still remember walking in my jungle fatigues and the Secretary of State coming and stopping me because people said there was this crazy guy coming in to sit down in jungle fatigues. So he checked me out and found out I was legitimate. I was who I said I was and everything, and that I really had won the election. And I was there for about 16 years as a senator. And that was, 25, 30 years ago, 25, 28 years ago, when I finally got out. Hey, I'm an old man now, unfortunately.
Well, what about Harris and Klebold and Sidney? The fact that you brought this lawsuit, the insurance companies then were determined.
Because I didn't even tell you the best part of the story in a way. I don't know if I should bring this up. So anyway, I was going to sue this particular drug company, and I won't even, Luvox was the name. It's still a major drug company. But anyway, I was going to sue them, and I think I may have filed it. I'd have to go back and check something, see what I've got on it. But because it's been a long time ago. But anyway, I was going to do that, but they started replacing me with a lawyer who was going to represent the poor boy, who happened to work for the drug industry. Move out. As I say, it gets crazy, insane, and as I say, they sent 3 patrolmen from Colorado way over to Nebraska to see what records I have. Those records officially, supposedly, are still sealed and nobody can get at.
And basically, they stole them from you. They've sealed them. And ladies and gentlemen,
yeah, but who knows? Maybe they didn't get them all.
Well, I hope not. I hope you had copies of them because, of course, you've been at this
long.
Well,
I know what was said in them, and so do some of the people that read them back when it was in court and everything, and I was out of the case then. And
basically, of course, what they did is they talked poor Donna into taking a lawyer on who was going to betray her, and he did. Yep. That's what they do, ladies and gentlemen.
And
in fact, let me tell you, there's so many people running for office. I've seen this time and again. Idealistic people, patriots, got to run for political office, and some guy comes along and says, I really want to help you. I believe in everything you're doing. And they're actually sent there to destroy them. I've seen this time and time and time again. That's what they did with Donna Taylor. That's how they got John off the case. But he's back on the case now. Go ahead, John.
Well, the very people that kind of terminated me way back, how many years ago has it been now? I don't know. People that terminated me and are now, they've been driving back and forth here to Nebraska regularly, and I get calls maybe 5 to 7 times a day, and we're going to reopen things, and I'm determined, as God is my witness, if anybody in this whole world is ever really deserving of getting out of being in that institution and being put on these, what I call doping drugs, high-powered certain antidepressants, it's Mark Taylor. He's one of the most wonderful young men on this planet Earth, and he lived through, and God helped him to live through that for a reason, and I believe it's for what's going to happen next in this case, and that's exposing a horrible bunch of things that officials in the system have covered up and kept secret.
It has to go to the very highest levels of the government there in Colorado.
Oh, yeah, that's why I said, I was going to tell you. So Colby, who was my best friend until he died here, a couple of years ago, and I'm sure he was killed, but that's another story. First of all, he was the most careful, cautious man there was on the whole world. Colby was, the former head of the CIA, you know. Now, supposedly, he's in his house alone, and when it's already starting to get sundown, so to speak, he gets into his boat, canoe, just goes out, falls out of it, supposedly drowns, and doesn't show up for many days. And I know he was killed. He was the most careful, meticulous individual there was. He didn't just go off and do crazy things anyway. But that's another story. But he was the one that told me, if you want to understand what's going on, because he had been the head of the CIA, you know, for a long time, and he'd watched. He was the one that opened up Watergate, you know, and all that. Remember Watergate? Anyway, and so he was the one that told me the system protects itself, and the system, if you want to understand it, he said, go read Billy Budd. Billy Budd was a book written, couple hundred years ago, and I never ever paid attention when he said it too much and forgot about it. And then one day I'm watching a movie, and the movie was Billy Budd. And Billy Budd is the story of a sailor in the British Navy hundreds of years ago, I guess, who didn't do the crime, but because they had to save the system, the officers, they sacrificed him and got people to testify and say, well, he did it, and so they had to kill him then. But anyway, Bill was my great advisor and helper in life, and I can still remember when I was with him for one of the final times was in Washington, D.C., just outside Washington, D.C. We were at some big thing. Henry Kissinger was there, and he and it was a Republican convention, maybe, national convention. And Bill met me there where we had arranged it, and Kissinger sees him and waves to him, and so Bill says, well, come on over. So Henry comes over, and I can still remember sitting down, and I said, wow, Mr. Kissinger, glad to meet you. And he said, yeah. Bill said, you should get to know him. He's the man who fired me, causing me to be fired. Kissinger just kind of giggled about it and laughed and said, yeah, I guess we did that at the time. No hard feelings. And they just joked about it. But anyway, it was kind of interesting, and Bill was one of the greatest persons ever, and he was the one the Senate of Nebraska hired then to investigate that Franklin thing, and that's where we had kind of reunited again, and he gave me great advice on exposing the things there and tracking this system, and it really is amazing, and that's why I wrote the book. Bill told me to write the book. I said, well, what do you think I should do? Because I'm kind of worried about some of the things that have happened and warning and all the people that have been killed in this case. And Bill said, the best thing you can do to protect yourself is tell your story. Don't hold anything back. I said, what do you mean tell my story? He says, tell everything you know. Then the percentage of benefit to them, the key people in this, whether they be anywhere from the president to the lowest person on earth, the benefit of killing you goes away from them because all it does is give you more credibility instead of making you look crazy.
How many people do you think were killed as far as...
I think I listed directly, I listed about 17 in the book.
About 17 people,
But that's just the ones I absolutely either was involved in helping or representing or were victims of them or whatever, anyway.
And ladies and gentlemen, this happens. We're not talking something imaginary. Get our 4 CD set on how they killed Martin Luther King, our 4 CD set on how they killed Bobby Kennedy, our 2 tape sets on certainly how they killed Jack Kennedy, and we have a DVD. We even have a 4 CD set, Deadly Assassins, where I actually interview government assassins. Both of them, incidentally, are dead. Our guest has been John DeCamp. This is not imaginary, ladies and gentlemen. This is real. His book, certainly, The Franklin Cover-Up, you can get through Amazon. They do have copies.
Amazon.com, and that's where they buy it. Now it's on the Internet or however they do that. I don't know that much about all this computer stuff, but...
Well, they do. Well, anyway, you're going to stick with this case until you get to the bottom of it and get Mark out of incarceration?
I sure am. I'm going to do everything I can to help, and I wish I could get some support from the people there in Colorado or wherever. Mark's mother is trying to get a fund organized to get some money so we can cover expenses, but it's going to cost a few bucks. But one way or another, I'm going to finally get this thing, like I told it years ago, on the table on the Columbine thing, because it's going to lead to a lot of other stuff.
Well, I tell you what, John, we do a program there in Colorado every morning. It'll be 9 o'clock in the morning your time. And we've got a lot of good, faithful listeners out there in Colorado. And I hope that many of them would be willing to contribute. Would you be willing to come on and do the morning program? That's 9 o'clock in the morning. We'll call you and make the appointment if you're up to it. And hopefully we can
do it, but I don't know how soon. Maybe in a week or so.
Okay, if I don't know, we'll call you here when we have a chance. Well, I guess it's been John DeCamp. Fascinating story, and I appreciate everything you're doing for Donna. And I know she's frantic, and I'm sure she's bugging you.
She's a great girl. She's a great girl.
Basically, she loves her son. And
she loves her kid. The kid loves her.
And this is the sort of thing that really
I love
does.
Both. They're good people.
And the fact that basically that this can happen is being covered up by the media. And I dare say you're probably not going to get back on Discovery Channel or History Channel with this story.
That's the next thing. You know, after the Discovery Channel thing got pulled I got the pirate copy. I've probably mailed out copies of that, maybe 50,000, 100,000 of them already, and I get just calls all the time for it, and just send it out. So if anybody wants it, I'll try to get it to them for just the cost of it. I think it costs about $2.5, $3.5.
Okay, fine. Now, what would be the address or telephone number people would call? How would they get in touch with you?
I tell you what, I'll give you my office number.
All right, fine.
402-477-3974. But that's my main office, and it's DeCamp Legal Services. So the moment you get somebody there, when they call, if they do, whether they will, make sure they understand that they're calling to order a book or order the tape, the
All right, we'll do it. We'll put the announcement out just as soon as we let you know.
Let me finish what I was going to tell you, the most important thing.
Go ahead.
Okay, so now, here about a month or so ago, 2 months ago, 2020, who did a documentary years and years ago, and then... Hold that
off a moment. John is just saying that many years ago, 2020 did a documentary on some of John's escapades. Go ahead, John.
Okay, so now here, a month or so ago, they're back and want me and Noreen Gosh, the mother of Johnny Gosh, because now, in the trials and things that have happened, they find out that it's true. And so we just did that about a month ago. We were filmed for it, and I don't know when it comes out or what's happening, but they're going full bore on that now.
Well, I just hope that...
Oh, wait, did I give you the best part?
What's the best part?
The best part of all. So I've been on maybe half a dozen programs here in the last 2 months, because a couple months ago, I don't know if you know this, you must have heard about it already. A couple months ago, I get contacted. Alex Jones, have you heard of him?
Oh, sure, Alex is a friend.
Okay, Alex Jones. They contact me, they want me on the program, even though I hadn't been on it for 10 years or something, and he told me, well, you are the surprise of all surprises. I said, well, what did I do? He says, you were the one 10 years ago, he told me. This has just happened in the last couple months. You were the one that identified what was going on at Pennsylvania at the school there. You named the coach. You named what he was doing. You went to officials, and you went on national television and radio and told about it, and then the programs got shut down and you got shut up and everything else. And I thought, oh shoot, I don't remember. And then I got thinking, that's right, I made a special trip. In fact, even took 2 of the kids that had been hauled there and used, took 2 of them with me to talk to the officials. But back when I did it, they threatened me with lawsuits and everything else if they did it. But I was the one that first brought up and told the world about that crazy Pennsylvania thing. Now, did you hear about this?
Nope. Hey, we're going to have to let you go, so we're out of time.
Okay, I'll run away, and you call me another day, and we'll talk. But this Pennsylvania thing is getting more interesting by the hour, because I get calls every day now.
God bless you, John.
Another wanting me to do this national program or something.
Well, you're always welcome with us. God bless. Thanks, John. And, Chris, that's John DeCamp. And if you want to get his book, The Franklin Cover-Up, you can purchase it from him, and he'll actually send you a free copy of this. A DVD, apparently, was what Discovery Channel did, and, of course, then it was suppressed. But you can call his office number at 402-477-3974. That's 402-477-3974. That's John's office. You can call them and just tell them you want to buy the book and you'd like to get a copy of this Discovery Channel video they did many years ago. It was suppressed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not imaginary. This is very real. They killed William Colby. In fact, there's a book, it's called The Missing Witnesses, of about well over 100 people who were affiliated with the assassination of John Kennedy, and they're all died. This is not imaginary. People knew anything about it. Why, of course, they simply have them assassinated. Our telephone number is 1-800-544-8927. You need to get our 4-tape set on the deadly assassins. The interviews, and 2 of the assassins are dead now. You need to get our 4-CD set on Martin Luther King, our 4-CD set on Bobby Kennedy. There's a book on King written by the lawyer hired by the King family. Certainly there is the book on Bobby Kennedy. There's a DVD on Bobby Kennedy. These things are real. They're not imaginary because of his organized evil in the world. And they have their meetings on a regular basis. They meet regularly at the Bohemian Grove. We have a 4-tape set on that and a book on the Bohemian Grove. And suddenly they meet at the Skull and Bones meetings. We have a 4-tape set on that and a book, America's Secret Establishment on Skull and Bones. You need to get my book, Brotherhood of Darkness. You need to become involved because, of course, freedom is going to disappear forever if you're not involved. And men and women become accomplices to the evils they fail to oppose. Our number, 1-800-544-8927, 1-800-544-8927.